Hi everyone and welcome back to the StudyTube project. My name's Lydia and today I'm going to be doing a book review of Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Reni Eddo-Lodge. I'm sure you've seen this book being recommended by lots of people on the internet in the past couple of weeks, and I thought for this video I would sit down and not really do a review in the sense of, oh, it's really well written, it's really well structured, but talk about an overview of it and what I've learnt from it, because I've recently finished reading it and I think it would be helpful to give you guys an insight, because there have been so many recommendations for books regarding race and racism. You know, Jade did a video a few days back talking about books that she's read, and I know that it can be quite intimidating and you often don't know where to start, but I think this book is a fantastic place to start, and that's why I want to talk a little more in detail about it. So firstly, a few disclaimers. Obviously I am a white person reading this book, so I am coming from that perspective. However, I mean this video with the very best intentions, but I know that I will also never fully understand. So if you think that I have said something wrong, or you think I could have phrased something better, or you think I need to learn and understand something more, please pull me up on it, because you know, I want to learn more too and I want to understand more too, and I think that's so important that we do call people out if they are saying something slightly wrong. Finally, the last disclaimer, this book is written from a British perspective. It talks about British systems such as the education system, the political system, so even though it does speak somewhat about American issues, it largely is focused on Britain, so bear that in mind. But I think that's so important because, you know, as a British person, I didn't know most of what is written in this book and I learned a lot from it. So the way in which I'm hoping to structure this video is I'm going to go through the book chapter by chapter. I'm going to try and not give too much away, because obviously it is so important that you do go and actually read the book yourself. However, I think that's the best way of doing it, because each chapter deals with different issues, kind of not individually but step by step, and I think that's also the best way of probably me giving an overview of it. I would also just like to point out that this is a very well referenced book, and you can see that in the really long note section at the back and the bibliography in the back as well. You know, Reni Eddo-Lodge does not just use sweeping statements and vague sort of points, she spits straight facts. And I want you to bear that in mind when I'm talking about the contents of the chapters, because I know people are very quick to get defensive. However, this book is just straight facts. Okay, so chapter 1 starts with the racial history of Britain, and I think this is such a fab place to start, because I feel like we can't understand racism in today's society without understanding where it all came from. So in terms of colonialism, imperialism, slavery, and Reni Eddo-Lodge writes it in a way where she starts from that period and works her way to very, very recent history, you know, literally within the past few years. And within the space of an hour or so when I was reading this book, I learnt more than I have ever learnt in my however many years of education that I've been in. I've just finished my first year of university for reference. Hardly any of the history that she writes about is actually taught in the British education curriculum, and I think therefore that's why this book is so important, because you learn so much from it. Chapter 2 then talks about the system. So this is institutions such as our police force, the NHS and our healthcare system, the education system, when it comes to finding jobs, applying for jobs, all of those systems that are in place in society. She also speaks about representation in those institutions, particularly in the bodies of power at the top of the institutions, and how greater representation is needed, because positions of power are very much dominated by white people currently, and therefore none of these systems are a level playing field at all. This chapter also explains covert racism really well and white privilege as well, and you know, as a white person, I never realised how racist these systems are and the institutions in our society are, and therefore, once again, really important to educate yourself on. Chapter 3 then nicely leads on from that and talks about white privilege. So Reni explains what it is and also why there are no movements such as White Lives Matter, because the society that we live in makes sure that white lives matter. I learned so much from this chapter because every white person is complicit in white privilege. However, it's not about getting defensive about that now, because that's just not a productive way of using your energy. It's about taking accountability and taking responsibility for that white privilege and using it to enforce change and make progress. This chapter also really helps you recognize the white privilege that you have as a white person and recognize it in all of the institutions. The way that she goes through every single institution, I have experienced that in pretty much every area of my life, and I think every other white person has too. Chapter 4 is then titled Fear of a Black Planet, and this chapter deals with concepts such as reverse racism and All Lives Matter, and how this can be used as a political advantage and a political standpoint. She also explains it in such a good way that just proves white privilege, because the way that particularly people such as politicians use these concepts just shows that they are aware that white privilege exists, because they don't want to be on the other end of it, and therefore they use it as a political point. Chapter 5 then deals with racism and feminism and how the two are very much interlinked. However, the current feminist movement is largely dominated by white women. It also explains the concept of intersectionality so well. This is something that I studied myself at university anyway. However, I have never seen it explained in such an easy and understandable way as Reni does in her book, and I think that's why this book is such a good place to start. And as someone that calls themselves a feminist and is also a white woman, this chapter taught me so much, because I think there's a tendency to see the movements regarding racism and the movements regarding feminism as separate things. However, they're not. They're very much intertwined. And the same goes for class and racism, which is what chapter 6 deals with. Just like there's intersectionality between race and gender, there's intersectionality between race and class, and Reni talks a lot about this from a political point of view, and how the working class is often seen as the white working class and disregards black working class members and ethnic minorities that are also working class, and the way that white working class is seen in a very different light to black people and ethnic minorities that are also working class. And then finally, chapter 7 is titled There's No Justice, There's Just Us. And this is a quote by Terry Pratchett, and it summarises the way in which Reni thinks that we should go forward, both as black people and white people, and I think this was a fantastic way to finish the book off, because it talks about how we can move forward as a society and the changes that we need to make in terms of tackling systemic racism and institutional racism. One point that she made that I thought was so good is that this isn't going to be solved by a superhero just sweeping in and solving all our problems and saving the day. We need to be proactive and make sure that we are making those changes and having these conversations, as uncomfortable as they are, as hard as they are, but because they are necessary, and that's how we need to move forward. So yeah, that was my little overview of Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Reni Eddo-Lodge. I hope that this video has been useful, and I'll have a link down below to the book and the ebook version and the Kindle version, because I really think that everybody should read this book, and I've learned so much from it personally, and I think you guys can learn so much from it too. So yeah, that's it for this video. Make sure to subscribe to the StudyTube project, because we've got lots of new videos coming your way very soon. And yeah, bye!